Moving on to other news now, and fighting in and around the Libyan capital has caused at least 20 injuries. The latest gun battles began after a prominent commander was captured by a rival faction. Mahmoud Hamza's forces control much of Tripoli. Warring factions have battled for control of the country since Muammar Gaddafi was deposed and killed 12 years ago. Let's bring in our correspondent Malik Trainer. He's joining us live from Tripoli. We're hearing that the fighting that's been a result of this commander's capture is the worst in Tripoli in months. Malik, what's happening there?
Well, that's exactly right. Tripoli has seen relative calm since the last time, last year, when violence erupted. Look, at the end of the day, people are suffering due to the lack of accountability towards these powerful armed groups here in Tripoli. That both of these groups, the Special Deterrence Force and the 444th Brigade, are under the umbrella of the security apparatus. They are funded by the Libyan government. So people are extremely angry as there are ongoing clashes, sporadic. We can hear sporadic gunfire every 10 to 15 minutes. We can clearly hear them. We've heard even the echoes of heavy artillery being used. So people are extremely angry. We've seen just recently in the last 20 or 30 minutes the Red Crescent, the Libyan Red Crescent, say that they've been able to evacuate about dozens of families from the areas of clashes. But for now, these clashes are still ongoing, and innocent civilians are being caught in the crossfire.
Yeah, again, clashes that are taking place, we're hearing, in areas that are quite densely populated. What are Libyan officials doing to de-escalate the situation, Malik?
Well, the Prime Minister is currently in a meeting with military and security officials. He's trying to negotiate a ceasefire between these two armed groups. But he has yet, neither the Prime Minister, the Chief of Staff of the military, or the Presidential Council release a statement towards the violence that is happening, reassuring people. And that's made residents here extremely angry. But we have seen a statement released by the UN support mission. Also, the U.S. Embassy has recently, just a few minutes ago, released a statement calling for the immediate de-escalation and for the parties to stop fighting and protect civilians. I mean, look, the situation in Tripoli can get very tense very quickly, and these incidents just prove that a nationwide agreement needs to happen where these armed groups are become loyal to Libyan institutions and not towards themselves. 20 people injured so far, and the fear is that if a solution isn't agreed upon real soon, the situation could escalate, and there'll be more people will suffer while these two groups continue fighting.
Malik, thank you very much for that. Malik Trainer with the latest live in Tripoli. Well, let's take a closer look at the two most powerful factions that have been fighting in the Libyan capital. The 444 Brigade controls large parts of southern Tripoli. Its leader, Mahmoud Hamza, was detained by its rival, the Special Deterrent Force, whose stronghold is Mitiga International Airport and controls parts of southern Tripoli. This sparked the latest round of violence, and both groups are backed by the UN-recognized government in Tripoli. Well, let's get more on this now. We're joined by Anas El Gumati. He's the director of the Southwark Institute. It's a think tank focusing on Libya, and he's joining us live from Istanbul. Good to see you, Mr. Gumati. Firstly, can you tell us a little bit more about Mahmoud Hamza and why he's been captured?
Well, he has an enormous standing amongst his brigade, the 444, but also I think he blurs the lines between the political factions that have been largely at peace for the last year in Tripoli and their allegiances towards the government of national unity as it stands under Abdelhamid Dbeibeh, and those that favor a unity government or an elite bargain with no other than Khalifa Haftar, the renegade general that has been behind many of these same kind of conflicts over the last several years. Those that are on the ground and that know Hamza quite well would suggest that he is in the anti-Haftar faction, and behind the scenes of this latest episode of the conflict, Hamza has been quite formidable in negotiations in the rival 5+5 military talks that were supposed to unify Libya's rival factions over the last several years. He has been a thorn in the negotiations against Haftar, and I think the timing is quite curious about why he was picked up in Mitiga International Airport only in the last 24 hours. So his standing, not only in Tripoli, but amongst other brigades that have similar sympathies, I think is quite telling.
OK, so a person of great importance. We're hearing that efforts by top government and army officials to have him freed have failed. What is it that the Special Deterrence Force wants?
Well, I think it goes back to what the larger picture of these negotiations, and there are negotiations that have been going on for several months now, to unify the rival military factions under the GNU in Tripoli, but also those aligned with the LNA under Khalifa Haftar. And I think why Mahmoud Hamza's position, not only in Tripoli, in the southern part of Tripoli, is so important, but if we look at where the fighting has extended to over the last 24 hours, they're not just, run-of-the-mill Libyan towns and cities, Shwerif, Beni Walid. These are areas that are under the control of the 444, and they're expanding towards those areas, but they're also critical supply lines, and supply lines are everything in the conquest for Tripoli. These were the key parts that were held by Khalifa Haftar when he took over or tried to attempt to take Tripoli in that power grab in April 2019. So when the wars move to these places, they're more telling. They're telling that the 444 is not only influential in Tripoli, it's influential in the parts of the country that will determine the fate of the capital.
Okay.
And I think that's why this timing is so curious.
OK, we're already seeing the worst fighting in Tripoli in months as a result of Hamza's capture. What will it take to de-escalate the situation now?
Well, sadly, the moving of the conflict towards the most densely populated parts of the capital are not enough for either the government of national unity, that has frankly not done enough in its ability to call off the fighting, but also for the UN and international community that have always been a little bit late. And when they're a little bit late, it always tells me that some people are involved at the highest levels, both internationally and domestically, and know that there is a power move on the hand. Conflicts like this in the past, regretfully, as bad as they get, it's not the humanitarian toll, it's not the tragedy that unfolds, it's phone calls that are made at the highest levels from members of the international community that tell those factions to pull out. Otherwise, they might be sanctioned or their finances might be frozen. And I think that's where probably this conflict will most likely end, or most likely end when someone makes a phone call and ends it. And that's a regretful part of the near 13 years of conflict in Libya. It's never the humanitarian toll that it meets the threshold. It's always the phone calls that decide it.
Mr. Gomati, it's great to get your perspective on this. We really appreciate it. That is Anas Al Gomati of the Sadak Institute, live in Istanbul.